Sunday morning, Logseq morning. I am looking at Logseq mastery tutorials by Dario da Silva, or One Stuttering Mind on Twitter, and it's interesting. He has several things that I've been thinking about. I'm not a beginner for Logseq. I have been using it for quite a while. I've been using it actively, but in the course it has all the basic things, so what is what and how do you do things, but it also has some of the more deep topics, and the one I'm gonna look at today is what is a page? And you would think, well, that's obvious, a page is a page, and what's the difference between a block and a page? Well, a block is just like a paragraph and a page is like a separate thing. But when you really think about it, it's quite deep. And here Dario, he makes some good points, and there is a video and he explains it quite well. I'm not going to play his video, we probably won't appreciate it if I put his course online. But what I liked is that information in a graph database is organized around nodes. So a node is a piece of information that you can use to organize information. And a page in Logseq is a node with a name. And you think, well, the page has a name, that is quite obvious. But why is that interesting? Well, it is interesting because blocks can be used just like pages. You can link to a block, you can copy a block, you can reuse a block, but you cannot name a block. And why is that interesting? And that is the thing I was going to do this Sunday morning. It says, how does this help our brains? Our brains are good at remembering things in association. The Baker-Baker paradox is a psychological phenomenon where a group of subjects find it easy to remember the keyword baker associated with a person when told that the person's profession is baker rather than the surname being Baker. I thought that's so interesting. Hello, this is Mr. Baker. All right, what is his name? I don't remember. This is Mr. Jones. His job is a baker. Who is this guy? I don't remember, but he was a baker. How does that work? So I already made some notes, but I didn't look at it deeply. So for today, let me zoom in on it. The Baker-Baker paradox, what is it? And this is interesting. There is this site that defines psychological terms. The definition of Baker-Baker paradox: people remember more words associated with faces when these words refer to an occupation than a proper name. In French is paradoxe boulanger, which I think is much nicer. If I'm ever going to use this in public, I'm going to say, yeah, it must be the paradoxe boulanger, which sounds much more interesting than the Baker-Baker paradox. Although that's pretty good too. So I made a copy of it. People remember more words associated with faces than when these words refer to an occupation. And then there was this link to Google Books, the cognitive psychology of proper names. The paradigm of association of information to unfamiliar faces was developed by McQueen in 1987. They asked their subjects to learn to associate just a name and a profession with faces. That's very long, very long, very long. The main result held even for these ambiguous labels, so that names were recalled less frequently than professions, even when the same items were involved. Has been termed the Baker-Baker paradox by Cohen in 1990, and that was what I was planning to do. I got a copy of the paper, and I'm going to read it and then find some interesting things and make some notes. Why is it difficult to put names to faces? 2 experiments tested the hypothesis that recall of names would be more difficult than recall of other personal identity information because names are meaningless and lack semantic associations. In both experiments, subjects were shown photographs of 12 unfamiliar faces and asked about information about each person. 3 types of information were supplied: name, occupation, and possessions. Experiment 1 manipulated the meaningfulness of possessions. Recall of names was no better than recall of names was no more possessions, and poorer than recall of meaningful possessions or meaningful occupations. Experiment 2 varied the meaningfulness of names and occupations. It showed that when names were meaningless, name recall was inferior, but if names were meaningful and occupations were meaningless, the deficit in name recall disappeared. In everyday life, it is fairly common experience to be confronted with someone you recognize as familiar but cannot name. Research, you may often be able to remember many biographical details, but still be unable to put a name to his own face. Yes. I often remember the operating system a person uses, but I don't remember his name, which is kind of embarrassing. According to this model, shown in Figure 1, person recognition is achieved by a set of functional components that are accessed in sequence. Perceptual information activates a face recognition unit, which in turn activates a person identity node, whereby the graphical and contextual information is stored. Names are stored within a further terminal node and can only be accessed via the person identity node. There is no direct link from face to name. Thus, biographical and contextual information in the person identity node is necessarily always accessed first and fastest. The model predicts that it should be impossible to remember a name without also recalling person identity information. Okay, so you have a face. It's familiar. That face has an identity. That identity is identified as a something, as a pilot or as a baker, and he also has a name, and that name is something. So this is one step further than this. And of course, immediately you can put a link to Logseq where everything is nodes. However, some aspects of name retrieval are not wholly explained by the model. Although there is good evidence that faces are only linked with names indirectly through an intermediate node containing biographical information, the model does not explain why this should be so. Why should names not be stored at the person identity node along with other biographical information? Yes. The experiment describes your take-up. They're suggesting that further studies should be able. It's all white like that. Discussion, yes. The results of the non-word condition show clearly that names and non-words are equivalent in terms of ease of recall and memorization and recognition. James failed to show any advantage over non-words. Occupation was remembered more easily, reported first and forgotten less frequently. Remember, occupation is virtually a precondition of remembering either names or non-words. Findings of this experiment are consistent with the view that names are treated like meaningless words. However, this view is difficult to reconcile with the results obtained by McWaney, as they found that using names like Baker, which do have meaning, and could therefore be encoded semantically, produced no improvement in name recall. Experiment 2 explored a possible explanation for this anomaly and examined the effects of varying the meaningfulness of both names and occupations. If meaningfulness is the critical factor that determines memorability, it should be possible to change the relative difficulty of recall for the two kinds of information. It does remind me of Memory Palace, that you have to put meaning, like a separate meaning to remember it. Experiment 2, further considerations as possible reasoning. They failed to take advantage of the potential meaning of the They found that memory for Ron Baker was poor than memory for occupation. Memory for Ron Baker was no better than against. The memory for Ron Baker was poorer than the occupation Baker, which they called the Baker-Baker paradox. However, if the name in the first instance is encoded meaningfully, excluding the conflicting representation who is both a baker and a lawyer. Subjects might be avoiding this conflict by not treating the name Baker as a lawyer. Yes, Mr. Baker is a lawyer, what does he do? This might be a discouraged subject for development from encoding meaning. Meaningless words. This is Mr. Baker, he is a Ryman. This is Mr. Baker, he is a lawyer. Results show that the meaningfulness of the item will illustrate the place. Names can be remembered as well as occupations if they are meaningful and if they do not conflict. In the comparison of conditions having so that's this one. Meaningful name was remembered better than the meaningless name. Yes, Mr. Raman is difficult to remember. everyday life is getting names are always treated as meaningless. People names may have, because these meanings are relevant, insensitive or conflict with the actual person identity information. A lot of nice thing to do. Taken to get the result. Experiments with dictionary names, creations and obsessions are all difficult to encode. People do not work in encode and meaning properly. Certain sufficient positions of the brain functions but experiments show that recall positions are dependent on recall attention. Probation is a key feature of the mechanism, defining the person's identity and providing explicit information, which is terrible. Subjects comment underlying the person's pre-existing semantic associations with other it is quite true. It looks like a baker. So this is the overall conclusion. The results reported here provide further confirmation of the broad outlines of the Bruce and Young model and indicate that memory for information in the person identity is superior because it's integrated with general knowledge stored in semantic memory. The relative inaccessibility of the name node is because names are not linked to the semantic network. It is difficult to put names to faces for the same reason that it is difficult to put non-words to faces. Both are lacking in a semantic association that allow other kinds of personal identity information to relate to stored knowledge. Let's make some notes. This illustrates things quite well. Let's make a little picture. That was not what I wanted to do for me. Copy paste is flaky still. Specialty nodes. Information retrieved step by step from the easiest node to the more difficult. Difficulties measured by semantic resolution is richer. Link nodes are more easier to recall and access. Page already exists. Let's clean it up with a template. Concepts. This would be the concept, and this would be the concept. Semantic associations. Also, context. To understand things out of context are difficult to recall, like a last name which does not have context by itself. But then I was thinking about pages versus blocks. This is me for Logseq. profession. Baker is the image it brings to mind. The name was just a face. The profession has many associations. So much richer. It's interesting that page, because it's so much richer in association, they're better and easier to use. And Dario concludes it like this. This allows for increased fluidity in the writing process. You can be writing in your database and then you just link it to some page. And this is much easier to remember than just a random block, because random block is just a bunch of numbers. Interesting. I'll make a note. And then later I'll use this to tweet something. Okay, this was a nice little excursion, and that was the recording.